Hello, good evening. My name is Derek Cerna Gallegos. I'm a cardiac surgeon at the University of Pittsburgh, and I've got Dr. Van Haren with me today. We're having a little bit of a pivot today. We're supposed to have Dr. Doug Liu from Stanford and Dr. Josh Grimm from the University of Texas. Dr. Grimm's going to join us a little bit later, and I'm not sure Dr. Liu is going to be able to join us. He had a patient commitment come up, but we will move forward. Dr. Van Haren has very generously agreed to participate, and the way we'll do this is me and Dr. Van Haren can talk, but we can really open it up to other people actually coming on and having their video come up too and ask questions and be part of the discussion. I think since there's only two of us on right now, it opens that up as a little bit more of a possibility. We have a couple things just to talk about, topics and stuff, but we really do want to not make this necessarily a didactic session, and make it more also, question and answer type of situation where if there's not questions, we have stuff that we can talk about, but really, we just want to kind of get everybody's thoughts and have as many people weigh in as possible. There is some STS leadership that's logging on too, and so if there are specific questions there, they may be able to get involved. So first, I think if Dr. Van Haren, if you wouldn't mind just introducing and telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. My name's Rob Van Haren. I'm a thoracic surgeon at the University of Cincinnati. I do general thoracic surgery, thoracic oncology, foregut, things like that clinically. I'm in my seventh year of practice, and I've been at Cincinnati since my fellowship completed.
That's great. So I just finished my fifth year of practice, and the topic today is kind of trying to get through your first 5 years of practice successfully.
Sounds like
And
you're perfect. You made it, huh? 5 years in.
I did make it. It's been a couple months after 5 years, so I have made it. And I guess the first kind of thought is like, well, why 5 years? What is it? Just a round number? But I think and you can give me your thoughts. But I think the learning curve is so quick initially. Your first year, you're still just kind of lost. Walking around trying to make sure everything goes okay, and it's hard to kind of move past just trying to get through the day to day, kind of going hand to mouth and trying to just survive. And then as those other years add on, you do get more comfortable. You start thinking about kind of your career trajectory in general, and we're going to talk a little bit about maybe different career trajectories and things that you might start thinking about in your first couple of years. But you never feel comfortable, but I think at 5 years you do hit a point where you do start to kind of hit your groove and become a little bit more less nervous every day when you're coming into work. So, what did you
Yeah,
feel like changed in your first 5 years?
yeah, I definitely agree and have similar feelings. The first few years in practice are a big transition, and really challenging to kind of deal with the day to day of the job and just logistics. And then again, after a year or two, it becomes more comfortable, and you're able to kind of take on more responsibilities. Do different things clinically and kind of eventually grow and take on more challenges. But it's something that I say to kind of our residents or friends who are starting practice early is that, yeah, definitely the first few years are a bit of a transition. And so I agree at kind of 5 years or so, um, you're kind of well into your early career and hopefully kind of starting to turn the corner and um, for kind of bigger and better as your career really starts to mature.
Yeah. Yeah, we have one question from Dr. Mitzman at University of Utah. He says, at what point did you both feel comfortable in your own shoes, and how did you make that realization? And, we both talked about that a little bit, but my first thing to say is you never feel completely comfortable. And part of that, I think, is that as you progress, you start getting out of your comfort zone a little bit with, the complexity of the procedures you do, and the kind of how sick the patients are. And so even though, you may feel more comfortable if you were doing the same cases now that you do in your first year, the reason you feel uncomfortable is because you're making that somewhat healthy progression into more complex cases, more sick patients. So from that standpoint of it, my own personal thought is that, I never feel, completely comfortable, but like I said, you start to kind of get in a rhythm and, know a little bit more about what to look out for and things like that. But in terms of like, for me, every case still makes me nervous. 5 years in, and I think that will be the case. If I'm lucky enough to practice for 25 years.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And as you said, as you maybe start getting comfortable with more standard things, you're more willing to take on higher risk procedures or higher risk patients. And I agree. I kind of, still feel tension and nerves in cases that I do, in the last week or so. You kind of feel it really every day. And even too, it's even outside of the OR, it's kind of every phase. Um, Making post-operative decisions on a patient that has a complication. How are you going to manage it? What are you going to do? Are you doing the right thing? All those things take time. I guess to answer Brian's question, yeah, I don't know. I think I don't have a good date or time when that kind of clicked. I think there comes a time when I think it's just kind of managing stress and managing complications. And when you realize that the complications that might happen after a surgery aren't a personal failure on your part, and that you kind of did everything that you could, did a good job, and unfortunately, there's still something maybe that happened. Not to say that that's always the case and you still can't do better, but early on, that's really hard, especially with complications that you see. That it's all on you and you should have done better, and some of that's too because you are learning and you can do a little bit better, but that's kind of the transition point for me, was kind of managing those issues, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a common experience among, a lot of people that I've talked to that have gone through their first 5 years and even further. One of the things I wanted to kind of talk about with this discussion is kind of about how to succeed in your first 5 years. And one of the kind of main things I think everybody should think about is just how are you going to measure your success, right? If we you start thinking once it's time to look for a job, once you find a job, what's going to be your kind of marker of quote unquote success? Now, for everybody that may be different, and I think that's a very individual kind of decision, but I think it's something that we all should start thinking about, right? So, and that ties into what kind of job you're looking for, and what kind of progression you expect, whether it's heavily in academics, heavily clinical, or a mix of both. But I think that is something that we really have to start thinking about very early on, right? Because none of this stuff just happens by chance or coincidence. So I think to start trying to get yourself thinking about how you want to measure your success early on. Otherwise, you have no bar to try and reach. And so, what were some of the things that you thought about when you were looking for jobs and thinking about your career? Maybe things that you wanted to achieve, in your first 5 years, and maybe that was, doing, 100 or 50 lobes by the time you're in your fifth year, or maybe it's something else like getting a K award or anything like that. But what were some of the things that you thought you wanted to achieve, within your first 5 years?
Yeah, I think, yeah, defining success, I would say, I think for me, and probably like most surgeons, the main thing is obviously just clinically and operating and doing a great job doing that. And as we kind of talked about in the beginning, that takes a lot of time, kind of energy and effort. And it's kind of all encompassing in the first couple of years. So I do think it's important to go to a place that has opportunities. And it's hard as an early career surgeon because you might not have it all figured out and know I want to be a basic scientist and have a lab that's going to study this disease and solve this mystery. It's great if you do, but I think most people don't have it all quite figured out on what their career plan is going to be. So I think finding a place that has lots of opportunities and good partners and collaborators that will get you there are important. And I agree, like you said, it's starting early with some of those things is important as well because those take time. Um, I guess for me, some of the things is I've become involved in our resident education and as program director of our integrated residency. And that kind of started early on as in my second or third year as the associate program director. So that was kind of an opportunity and something that I've enjoyed doing and still kind of developing today. Even last week, I went to the American College of Surgeons as Educators course, and that was a great course to learn about education and all kind of a deep dive on it. So kind of still learning and improving on that. And then similarly, if it's research, getting involved in that, that takes time to develop collaborations, develop projects, publications, preliminary data. And my experience there has been also too, it's a lot of failures and grants that don't get funded and keep on improving and kind of going on to the next to try and get kind of a more of a polished and finished project. So definitely takes time. So the sooner you can identify those goals or success, the better. But I think a lot of people early on, it's hard. So it's okay not to have it all lined up immediately as well.
Yeah, I think the details maybe aren't so important of like I want to do this, this many times or this many cases or whatever. But I think, like you said, maybe I want to be involved in resident education as from kind of an administrative level, like potentially a program director or that type of thing. So I think, yeah, I think that's good. And if I guess we'll go to there's two questions. The first one is from Dr. Mitzman. Where do you draw the line regarding risk in your first couple of years, and how did you handle things above your pay grade? So, um, yeah, I think we all kind of have somewhat of a kind of a gut feeling of our own risk tolerance. Everybody's risk tolerance is a little bit different, but I think in your first 5 years, you really should try to lean on the being less risk tolerant. Now, that doesn't mean you should just say no to everything that's potentially risky. Because I think in a lot of ways, you want to be very helpful to your partners in terms of like, you don't want to feel like, or them to feel necessarily like, oh, well, I offered this case to Derek and, he just straight up said, no, I'm not going to do it. It's too risky. But there is a way to help out and be helpful to be a good partner and a good team player at the same time by saying, like maybe, this is a difficult case. It's maybe above my pay grade, but I'm happy to. I would like to help you with it. I'd like to scrub with you and see how it gets done because down the line that case is going to be in your pay grade. So I think avoiding them completely is the wrong thing to do. I think being involved with them, maybe not as the primary surgeon, or or maybe as a primary surgeon if your partner's willing to help you. Um, I think that you have to kind of gradually mature little by little every year to the point where those things become in your pay grade. But I think early on you have to be very honest with yourself about your skills, your experience, and honestly keep the patient's best interest uh, at heart. Meaning, maybe this isn't the case for me to do. I'd love to help you with it, or to do it with your help from one of your partners. But that was kind of how I managed it. I do think it's a little problematic to just try and stay away completely from those cases, so I wouldn't recommend that. But being involved somehow, I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Rob?
No, yeah, I agree. I think in the beginning, kind of like Brian, Dr. Mitzman brought up, you have to. I think you should be conservative in case selection and kind of vigilant about your outcomes. but I think you kind of brought up a good strategy of involving senior partners, either to assist with the case or just to be around as you know, if you need a second set of eyes of what to do, or even to just do the case you said together or with them. I think those are good strategies as well.
Okay, we got one other question here. Any tips or tricks for managing the day-to-day logistics as a resident that's hard, or as a resident that's something we don't generally have to deal with? So, I would argue that every day you deal with day-to-day logistics as a resident, and what I would say is, as a resident, you have less control over your schedule than you do as an attending. So, um, you know, I think once you get to the level of being a resident and graduating from residency, you may not realize it, but you have developed ways of dealing with those logistics, right? And they're the same kind of logistics as a lot of people deal with, right? Like, so how, if you have children, how are you going to get your children taken care of when are on call, or that type of thing? Or just, how am I going to, get all this work done, be it my clinical work and my research work. And most people that are at the point of finishing residency have started to deal with those things already. And in terms of specific tips or tricks, what I would say is, initially in the first 5 years, do your best not to spread yourself too thin, right? And this comes back to somewhat of the idea of, it's better to over deliver. At first. And so you don't want to start out your first 5 years as someone who commits to too much and doesn't deliver enough. That's what I would say, is you're going to have a lot of clinical stress with all the new work that you're doing, and I would try to somewhat limit the things that you commit yourself to. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think residents, don't sell yourself short. You're good at managing problems and logistics. I think as an attending, you get exposed to some kind of different areas, like outpatient phone calls or clinic issues, where so much of residency is inpatients and taking care of the census and all the patients that are admitted. Um, so as an attending, you get kind of all sides of it. You get patients that are in clinic or patients that are home, and what are you going to do about those? Again, as a resident, you get a taste of all that as well. But I think those are the things. It's just a little bit different, but I agree. It's kind of the same skill set. So hopefully that kind of answered that question for them.
I guess the next question is, can you talk about practicing in a field as heavily scrutinized as cardiac surgery? And I would add to that, thoracic surgery, as their outcomes are being scrutinized just as much as cardiac surgery are now, whether that be malpractice outcomes being tracked, et cetera. I mean, I don't think it necessarily makes you practice different, or at least I would say I hope it doesn't make us practice any different. I mean, whether or not our outcomes are scrutinized, I think we strive always to just have the best outcomes possible. So, I think, I don't know. I mean, it is something that you think about, and it is something that is followed. I don't know what it's like for you, Dr. Van Haren, but we get like emails just saying that you can log on to this system and see what your outcomes are, and you can compare them in an anonymous way to the other surgeons and stuff like that. So you do have, you are aware of it. But, in my day to day, I try actually not to let it affect, who I offer surgery to or who I don't, and I think, we probably, that's probably the way we should practice, is not necessarily concerned with the scrutiny.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question, and in some ways, I think it is a positive that we're um, keeping close attention to our outcomes. And like you said, the ultimate goal is really to provide excellent care to patients and to do well by them. I agree 100%. So it's probably a problem to affecting your day to day. I think it's great that you like with the Society of Thoracic Surgery database that we get the data harvest and reports, and we can see how we can compare um, to other centers and nationally, and we can really develop areas that we can continually improve. And I think that's kind of the maybe the one aspect about scrutiny is you're always trying to do better and find ways to do things a little bit different and always improving. And even if you're doing well, like how can you do better? So I think that's the positive side of that as a specialty for cardiothoracic surgery. I guess I agree. There is some downside of that as well with, bad outcomes or litigation, things like that. But a lot of it, I think, that pressure is some ways good.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I think is most important about determining success, especially in your first 5 years, is job selection. And I think a lot of it is trying to evaluate jobs when you're late in your training and trying to pick a job that's going to allow you to succeed. And so, what are some of the ways, Dr. Van Haren, that you looked at job opportunities and things that you weighed in terms of what you thought would be the best, give you the best chances to succeed? Things that you thought about when you were comparing, the probably hundreds of job opportunities you had.
Yeah. The and I agree. I think and the job that you are at probably plays a huge role in how successful your first 5 years are. Um, if you're a great surgeon, but you just go to a horrible job, or you go to a place where it ends up being a horrible situation for your family, it's just not going to be successful. So I think, yeah, trying to evaluate those opportunities are really important. And I think for me, I think you have to look for the things you want in a job, whether it's clinical, research, education, like kind of resources you want, and the cases you're going to be doing. I think the other big thing is again your life outside the hospital, whether it's yourself personally or your family. Is it an environment that they're going to be happy in and also succeed? And then I guess going back to the job, I think one of the biggest things is really the people you're going to be working with. So what's the culture? What's the environment? And who are your partners? And are they going to be supportive? Because like we talked about, um, the first few years are busy and you're going to need to lean on your partners, and you want to have people that are supportive and really helping you grow. So those are, I think, the partners and you know a good fit for yourself and your family were kind of the main things I looked at once you kind of had all the other essentials kind of nailed down. What about
Yeah,
you? What did you look for or
you
your
know,
experience?
I think for this, I think the most important thing, this is what I tell our residents, is you have to be completely honest with yourself, right? So, if what you're saying is what you think you want, which is I want to go and be the busiest clinical surgeon ever, so any job that says they're going to have tons and tons of cases for me, that's the job I want. And you really have to have some self introspection and decide what it is that you're trying to get yourself into. The issue is that when you sign up for something, you're going to probably get what you signed up for, right? So if you're thinking all I want to do is clinical work and I want to go somewhere that's incredibly clinically busy, and then you get there and you get that, and you realize, well, maybe I didn't want to be doing as many cases a year as I'm doing, because it's like drinking from a fire hose or something like that. you know, you probably have some inkling of what's a good fit for you before you get to that point. So the first thing I'd say is just being honest with yourself about what you want and what you want to get yourself into. The other thing, like you said, is definitely family fit. If you're alone, then you can go anywhere you want. If you've got family, then you got to have considerations of what your partner is, whether your partner is going to be happy there. if you have children, what your situation is going to be like for your kids. Probably one of the last things I would say to think about is the actual money you're going to get, right? Because we've all probably seen people take jobs out of residency for a very large sum of money, and be in a situation that's not great clinically. And that's a very short-sighted way, I think, to evaluate jobs, is just to look at how much you're going to get paid. And the more long-term, better way to look at it is, where am I going to be able to sustain myself? Where am I going to be able to last, right? Because if you make it through your first 5 years, doesn't mean that you've made it by any means. But there is something to be said for just being able to kind of continually produce, whether it's at one institution or whether you move institutions, but being able to continually, progress as a surgeon. And the money side of that can get you into trouble if that's all you're chasing. So, things that I looked at, like you said, your family situation, what part of the country necessarily you want to be in, those types of things. But
Yeah,
most
good
important,
reminder for me to fill out my STS compensation survey, which I know they emailed out, but I haven't filled it out. But yeah, good point about the money. And I think too that survey really wasn't around when I was looking for jobs, but I think it would probably help as you're dealing with offers and kind of seeing, okay, what's the average salary for this, either academic or private, and in different parts of the country, and also the cases that are done, or the volume. So I think it's a good resource that the STS provides for its members. Probably be useful for that first job as well.
I'd have to give a plug to STS for exactly what they're doing. It's an incredible resource what they're doing with having surgeons reply to that. Not You can get MGMA data and stuff like that, but when you're trying to evaluate, because yes, money's not everything, but you do want to be paid a fair wage for the work you're doing and stuff like that. So, I STS has done an incredible job with that, and I got to take my hat off to them, because that is something that we don't necessarily want to talk about in the open with each other as much, and maybe it is something that we should, not in a bragging sense or a complaining sense, but in a putting it out there honest sense, so that you can have an honest evaluation of your worth, right? All of our worth as surgeons in different parts of the country. So I agree with you completely on that. The one thing I would add to the job situation, and arguably the most important thing, which you mentioned also, is your partners and the people that you're going to be with, because especially in those first 5 years, them helping you, that is, at least in my experience, that has been one of the things that has propelled people the most who are successful, is having the support of their partners to help them when they're in difficult situations, help them when they have a complex case. And I would definitely say it does not stop after 5 years. I still ask my partners for help all the time, and so that's a huge thing. So if you're evaluating jobs and one of the jobs you think has incredible mentorship, someone who's very invested in your success, and another job where it's, people are kind of lukewarm about you, some of the surgeons don't think they need another surgeon in that job, some of the surgeons aren't that excited about it, that is a job that I would really stay away from, because I have heard of situations where residents and fellows take a job, and the job is being pushed by the hospital administration. We need another surgeon, but the surgeons themselves feel like they don't need another one. Maybe they feel like there's just enough cases to go around, and they don't want to necessarily have to give up cases. But I would just
Yeah,
say
that's a red flag, kind of, for
huge,
sure.
huge red flag. Yeah.
And then I think your point, like if you get the sense that people if they aren't excited to say they're going to support you at 3 p.m. in an interview day, they're not going to be answering that phone call in the middle of the night and coming in to help, when it's really time. So
Yeah.
I think those are kind of, yeah, like red flags and things to look out for in the job process, for sure.
Let me get to the next question here. It says, how much time would you recommend spending in the OR watching or scrubbing with your senior partners. I mean, especially in that first year, I would say, in those times when you don't have a lot of cases and you have a lot of free time, I would say as much as you can. A couple of the things it does. Number one, it shows your partners that you're a team player. Like you're not someone who's just sitting in their office. Like if it's not my case, I'm not getting up out of my office, right? The other thing is you're going to see if you go somewhere differently from where you trained, you're going to see different ways of doing stuff. And it's up to you to decide which way you want. But it's always good to see different techniques, different ways of skinning the same cat. So I would say as much as possible, and I think that shows, you're a team player, camaraderie, you're interested, you're enthusiastic, and those are the type of people that get really good support from their partners and their new mentors and stuff. But what would you say, Dr. Van Haren?
Yeah, I think I agree. The other, I think, advantage as well is it allows you to interact with the team and the OR team, or maybe the residents or the physician's assistants or the nurses, and meet them and work with them more so they get comfortable with you. And then also too, since it's not your case, you're maybe less stressed and you're able to connect and establish those relationships. So I think from kind of a personal standpoint too, it can be helpful.
Yeah, I always found that to be very good, and when once you're kind of through, once you're not the most junior person anymore, you do see, you notice that, if someone's just, and it's the same as kind of you can notice with residents and stuff too. It's just, how enthusiastic are they? How much do they love getting up every day and coming in to do surgery? I mean, it's it's just something that really stands out for those, the rare individuals that have that, So I think scrubbing with your partner as much as you can. I wouldn't say you necessarily have to say every third day of the week I'm going to do it, but just whatever makes sense for your situation.
Yeah, I think there was a comment earlier asking I think it was a question about age, um, and if I think it was, let's see, like what age we started practicing. Do we think age matters? Um, And I guess I would say, I don't think, just to kind of answer, I don't think age, the actual number necessarily matters. Probably more just maturity and experience is probably more important than the number. Kind of like when you look at a patient and whether they're 75 or 65, the age might not be relevant, more what are their, what comorbidities and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So one of the other things, I wanted to have like kind of when I was thinking about this talk and everything, I wanted to try and get people from different kinds of practices, um, academic practices and private practices or hospital-based practices, just to kind of get an idea of what it's like to try and succeed in the different practice types. And some of the speakers I had in mind weren't free, so I think you know
Yeah, maybe that tells us something about the practice types.
yeah.
And maybe not, but
But
yeah,
yeah, I
that's
mean, in your institution, I mean, like our institution has some outlying hospitals that provide kind of more of a practice like that, and kind of my I guess the general consensus, or not consensus, but the thought would be that if it's a smaller institution, a smaller hospital, the kind of personal connections and stuff may be more important or may not be than if you're at a 2,000 bed hospital where um, you know everybody feels more like a little bit of a cog in the system. Um, but do you have different kinds of practice types at your institution? And have you noticed a difference in how you would try to succeed in terms of referral base and stuff like that?
not so much. I mean, I guess I do spend a day at the VA in Cincinnati as well. That's obviously different from practice and referrals, but it is smaller and you kind of, I guess the one thing, it's like in the hospital, you get a sense of a small community, smaller teams. You're more familiar with the people in the OR because it's the same kind of people every day, as opposed to a big hospital system where there's lots of changes and transitions. So I get a little bit of that different feeling there, I would say.
Great. Well, I think we have Dr. Grimm, fresh from saving. And if you could, Dr. Grimm, just kind of introduce yourself, and then I can tell you a little bit about what we're talking about. Maybe get your opinion on some of the things we've been discussing.
Sure. Yeah, Josh Grimm. I'm a cardiac surgeon. Um, Buddies with Derek, so and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm in my, I think sixth year of practice. This is going on my sixth year, five and a half maybe. Um, and I'm in an academic center in Austin, Texas, at Dell Med School. And yeah, I don't know what else you wanted me to share.
No, that's good. We've been kind of talking about the idea of, how to succeed in your first 5 years, and what's kind of been kind of special, I guess, ways to try and have success in your first 5 years. We've talked a little bit about, case selection, things that we look for initially when you're looking for jobs, um, and kind of having that support from mentors, in your institution, and maybe mentors that you trained with. But what are some of the things that you thought about in terms of when you were looking for jobs, and when you were thinking about in your mind the idea of success that you had? Did were you thinking, oh, I want to get a K award and then an R award, and I want to do a lot of research? Were you thinking I just want to do a lot of cases? What were some of the things that you were looking for when you started looking to get a job right out of fellowship?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think really, people focus, I hate the term like community practice. That's such a weird term. I've never really understood it. I think it has almost a negative connotation, and I don't really get that. I think there's a lot of really great heart surgeons, both in sort of what you would consider traditional academic centers and more non-academic, maybe private practice. And there's nice fusions actually of both, where you can train and write, and it's sort of an atypical academic center, but maybe it's more reimbursed like a private practice group. But for me, I knew I wasn't going to be like a true quote unquote surgeon scientist. I mean, I like to write, I like to do research. Most of it's clinical based. I like working with industry, so on trials, stent grafts, things like that. Um, the one thing I'll tell you is what my mentors at Penn, when my first job was in Philadelphia for 3 years. And Wilson Zito, Nimesh Desai, Joe Bavaria, they were all really um, important in my first couple of years. They supported me well, and they were great mentors. And they said, be as busy as you can early on. Don't say no to cases that seem quote unquote below you, which I think is important, right? Everyone comes out and they want to be a off pump cabbage surgeon or heart port mitral surgeon or a complex aortic surgeon, and so they might turn down cabbages if they're an aortic surgeon. And I'll tell you, Nimesh told me, he said, that's how you're judged. You're judged by a cabbage. So here I was getting great aortic training, and I wanted to come out and do, arches and thoracos and type A's and ruptures and valve sparings. But the case that I worried most about was a bypass surgery. Um, and so that's sort of incongruent, right? Because then your practice might change. So I came to Austin. I was doing most of the aorta at Penn. I came to Austin, and we were building this practice, and it was mostly bread and butter cabbages and valves, and now we've ramped up our aorta big time. But it took 6 to 9 months, and boy, if I didn't have the fundamentals on how to do a bypass procedure, I'd be in really big trouble when I move jobs. So you don't want to put yourself in a corner where you can only be hired to do complex aorta, and then you go to a place that doesn't do complex aorta, and then you're sort of in trouble. So you want to play your strengths, and you want to be diversified in what you can do and what you can offer a place.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the change in institutions? Do you feel like the same things that would make you successful at Penn make you successful in Texas? Or did you feel like you had to change, any approach or change anything about how you were, succeeding before in order to be successful, whether it's, interpersonal relationships with the new people that you're working with, or different way of having relationships with referring docs, that type of thing?
That's a really great question. I mean, I was lucky in Philly. You can be sort of a nothing burger like I was, fourth in line and still get great cases because there was just so much throughput at Penn. And a lot of people came to Penn and considered you an expert, and I was, like my first week isn't attending, and that's hilarious to me just because I was a Penn aortic surgeon. And then when I came to Austin, it was different. I mean, we had to prove ourselves. We were not a known entity. None of us were. I trained in Philly, and so the nurses knew who I was. The cardiologist knew who I was, and they had an idea who I was at least. And here, no one really knew who we were, and so it doesn't matter what I could do in Philadelphia. You had to prove your worth here. And so you're right, fostering relationships, being helpful to people, always being available. We did a lot of outreach, which I never really had to do that much in Philadelphia. The cases sort of came. Um, did a lot of outreach. Every emergency department had my phone number, and that allowed us to sort of ramp up volume that was not really staying in Austin. It was going to Houston and Dallas, and some of it still does, but a lion's share of it stays local. Um, but honestly, Derek, you know what it comes down to, and I missed the beginning. I'm sorry. Is if you work hard and you take pride in what you do, and you're not lazy, and you include people in decision making, right? Like if a cardiologist sends you a patient and you do bypass surgery or do a valve, and talking to them before the procedure and then after the procedure is so critical. I mean, I've learned that a lot from George actually, my boss George Arnatakis, who I think a lot of people know. Um, I don't think he does it just to placate people. I think he does it because he really likes human interaction. But he'll oftentimes call a cardiologist before he sees the patient in clinic and say, "Hey, I'm going to go see Mr. Thomas. You sent him here for bypass. I'm looking at the cath. What are you thinking? Here's what I'm thinking." And then he'll call them first thing out of the OR. And I think building that relationship where the cardiologist feels like they're part of the treatment team is really critical. I think anything, whether it's cancer surgery and thoracic surgery or cardiac surgery. And I'm sure you've seen that in your practice in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think whether you're cardiac, thoracic, any sort of proceduralist, interventional radiology or anything like that, I think involving, just like you said, involving the referring docs. I mean, they're sending someone to you because they think that you can help them. And when you reach back out to them and say, "Hey, listen, um, exactly like you said, what were you kind of thinking here?" If there's any nuance in the situation at all, discussing it with them beforehand, because say you do something different than what they were thinking, they're gonna notice that, right? So, um, you know, letting them know kind of what you're thinking, what your strategy is, and how you plan to deal with the patient, because a lot of these patients they've known for much longer than we know them. We meet them, operate on them. Some of them we continue to follow for surveillance for different issues, but a lot of them we don't. And so that patient's going to go back to that referring. And I think you're exactly right that just, being in contact with them only helps. And to be honest, it only helps the patient also because, closing that loop, we all know how the Swiss cheese model works and how things can fall through the cracks. And you put in a mechanical valve and later the PCP doesn't realize it's supposed to be following the INRs, whatever, and bad things can happen. So I think that's, really important. Going kind of back to, things we were saying to make sure things to avoid to do, I would say, in your first 5 years. Is there anything that comes to mind, Dr. Van Haren, about, I guess we want to kind of give people an idea of what to do to be successful, but also what not to do. Josh had brought up some things like don't say no to cases. Don't think that anything is beneath you. But was there anything that kind of comes to your mind right now? As I put you on the spot about that?
Yeah, good question. I guess I'll go with kind of the personal relationships and and that's probably something that can happen easily, is to treat someone not nice in the OR, or even maybe a referring physician, or or a different team. But that kind of stuff is going to be a big problem, and really become toxic, and start a bad reputation. So I think just trying to go out of your way to collaborate and work with people and be nice to everyone and treat everyone with respect is so um, things to try and do.
Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. Grimm?
I think that's actually a really good point. I mean, my default notion of most people is that they go to work and try their best. Now, there's some screwballs that probably go to work and don't care, but I think a majority of people at every level are really trying. And we are all human, we all make mistakes, and you can really burn a bridge with an individual when you chew them out or lose your temper. And I could not agree more. I mean, if you do good work, don't showboat your cases. You do a nice minimally invasive robotic resection of something and just call the referrer and tell about it. The patient goes to the ICU and does great, and you're not out there sort of peacocking and showboating. The staff picks up on that, your humility, your kindness, and that speaks for itself. I think when you have to start talking about the cases you're doing and how tough they were and how the patients did, I think that gets a little bit overbearing, and it doesn't really do much for you.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think, when we're talking about, calling the referrings and tell them, oh my God, we did this amazing case. Look at how great I am. Send me more patients. I think the other corollary to that is you have to be honest and calm when something goes poorly, right?
Oh yeah.
They're going to respect that much more. And like I mentioned before, they've known these patients for a long time. So say, Mr. Smith has been followed for his aortic stenosis for 8 years, right, with his cardiologist, and they know each other well. And every year they get an echo, and finally, he got symptoms, and it's time to fix him, and he has a stroke afterwards. You cannot let that the referring find that out either from the family or from the patient coming back to see him. We have to own our outcomes. If we're going to showboat the good outcomes, we have to also make sure that our referrings will trust us to tell them when there's something that does not go perfectly. One of the things that kind of goes along with that, the showboating or just the not showboating, but just being happy about your successes, is how are you able to continue to be a team player while also being able to express that either you're doing well or you're having success? How are you able to not make it seem like you're showboating, right? So you do some good cases. You want the cardiologist to know, listen, my outcomes are good. I've been doing CABGs, like Josh was saying. I moved here to Texas. I haven't had, I've had really good outcomes. Haven't had a death in a year or something like that, and patients are doing well. How do you go out and kind of promote yourself while at the same time being a team player and not making it seem like you're kind of promoting yourself at the expense of your partners? I guess Dr. Van Haren, if you could start off with that.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the phrasing and using the word we, because I mean, yeah, we do a lot as the surgeon, but it's really more than us in the operating room, and even post-operatively, especially in the ICU and the floor. So it's really a team approach, and even too, some of the complex cases you might do it with a partner or have someone that help you, or their decision making or helping you prepare for the case ahead of time was just as important as you throwing the stitches. So I think that's what I try and do, is if there's something exciting that we did, try and say that we did it, and it wasn't just me as the attending surgeon that did something great.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's easy in the sense that you just give everybody credit, right? We as a team, or like, we've maybe not, I've been doing CABGs and haven't had any bad outcomes in a year, but we have been doing CABGs. I think that's the perfect answer, really, is just everything is a we when you're talking about success and situations. I think that's perfect. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Grimm?
It's that was summarized well.
Okay, so when you were Dr. Grimm, when you were looking at job opportunities coming right out of fellowship, was that different than when you were looking at a job opportunity, after being in practice for 3 years? I mean, what was kind of your thought process on kind of making that transition? How did you know it was time to make that transition? And what kind of things went into, actually making making the move?
Yeah, my first job was sort of like right before COVID, and so things were a little bit weird. I sort of snuck in and got a job offer before COVID hit because I think things stalled around that time, but or stalled. But my first job was to stay in Philly, which my family wanted to do, and that was a great opportunity. And when Mike Acker sits across from you at a bar with a Bud Light and says, "We want you to stay," I mean, it's hard to say no. I mean, it's such an overbearing, amazing person, but he's a big dude. He's 6'6" and with a very strong mustache presence. And so I just said, "Sure, that's great." And I had great mentors there, and it worked out great. My family was happy. I'm a native Texan, and so, when this I did not want to leave Philly. This was a pull and not a push. I had really a great time in Philadelphia, great colleagues, and Penn's only getting stronger. So it's awesome. I stay in touch with all of them. But when this opportunity arose in Austin, I've known George for 15 years, and my in-laws live in Austin. I'm from Texas. I'm a diehard Longhorn, even though we're not very good this year. And so the opportunity to come and build something as someone that's been out for 3.5 years, start an aortic program, direct that, be the PI on trials. That wasn't in the books for me in Philly for good reason. There are great surgeons ahead of me. And so I sort of got an opportunity, I think, maybe 10 years before I should have. And I appreciated George's trust in me, and it's been really, really fun to be back here. And I prefer flip-flops to snowshoes, so it's worked out well.
So would you say that it was, a lot of the move was based on your trust in George and the fact that you guys had a relationship previously,
Yeah.
and that led you to say, listen,
Well,
this is something.
institutionally, I mean, you have to look at the institution, right? I mean, that was my big thing is, UT Austin is too big to let anything like this fail. The people that were here before me, Chuck Frazier, Dr. Frazier on the congenital side, very well known, Carlos Mary, who's now chief of Vanderbilt. I mean, all of these people had left their established jobs, in Houston and made the move to Austin. And in short order, George was able to, he's so charismatic. He was able to recruit, Karen Kim and some very big names in STS and good people. I mean, the names are like so really unimportant, but it's just the character of the people. And I told George, um, because Penn was a little bit different in this regard. I told George the biggest goal for me and would define success in Austin would be if in 50 years people knew that cardiovascular care was really good at Dell Med School, but they didn't really know like, oh, it was George or Josh or Karen. It was the group of people, sort of like what you were talking about a second ago, the we mentality. I think that defines success, long-term success, right? Like if you can build a program where the individuals are just part of the whole recipe, and it's the program that's really strong and successful, sort of like Cleveland Clinic, right? I mean, there's monsters at Cleveland Clinic, but people just talk about Cleveland Clinic. Sure, Dr. Roselli, there's a lot of great names there, but the institution is really standing out. And then you just sort of reload with young faculty, and it just stays strong for decades and decades and decades. And it becomes sort of an immovable machine, and that's real success.
We had a question from Dr. Okusanya that, the job that you got, you happen to mention, oh, it gave me opportunities that I should have waited another 10 years for. I think I'm not sure if he's lost his connection. Oh, so there was a question about, when you said I got a job opportunity that really I should have been 10 years down the line in terms of the responsibilities and stuff. How did you know that you were up for that? Was it just, self-confidence and you knew that, you could take that on? Because some people may say, well, that's great, but I don't know that I could do that.
It comes down to your support. I mean, George and I had so many conversations before we decided to move to Austin, and I felt good with the surgeries, and I think I'm like a pretty nice person, and so I knew that we'd be able to build something and be successful. I mean, but to your point, man, it was a risky proposition. I was leaving the Yankees for sort of like a startup team, and that can be a little bit scary, but you just do it day to day. And it took me 4 or 5 months, Derek, to do my first aortic case. I mean, there were months where I was doing 20 cabbages, and that was cool because I got to do a lot of cabbages. And now we're sort of steamrolling through aortic cases, and it's been really fun to just sit back and just say, "Wow!" I mean, because Dr. Van Helsing, this staff didn't know how to do cases like this. And now it's like they talk the talk. Yeah, ICU didn't know how to manage thoracos and lumbar drains and how to rescue spinal cord ischemia. And now they call me with the plans. They say, hey, so and so's having this issue. We've already touched base with X, Y, and Z. And I think it's been enriching not just for me, but really for the whole hospital. I mean, the ICU has been transformed, and I really do think we're helping people in this area. And that is something that, yeah, am I doing less volume? 100%. 100% doing less volume than I was in Philadelphia. But it's all about how you define success and what you're pursuing in your career, right? I mean, is it better to build a program that does maybe 150 or 200 orders a year where they were doing 10 and the rest were having people were having to go to Houston or Dallas or whatnot? Or do you want to stay at a place and you're going to do 800 to 1,000 and you just reload every year with new great faculty? I mean, it just depends what you want. I mean,
Yeah, I
going out
mean,
and sorry,
when
go
I
for it.
think about it, when I think about it too, I think enthusiasm is such a something that you can't necessarily factor in, But when you have people who are just enthusiastic about everything that they're doing, I think success is almost inevitable if you're really enthusiastic and really kind of dedicated to it. So we're running out a little bit of time here. Um, I guess, I think it's been a great conversation. I gotta really thank Dr. Van Haren for stepping in and really getting me off the hook in terms of being able to be here for the discussion. So I think,
Yeah,
if
happy
we
to
could all
join.
if we can get a round of applause for him, that'd be great. And I want to thank Dr. Grimm from taking time after, saving another life for us and to talk here on the STS, a self-proclaimed very nice guy, and I would second that.
Yeah,
So
we might have to put a disclaimer that he's not operating while on this
yeah,
call.
exactly.
No, no,
No.
no, I'm done. We're done.
Hey, yeah, there's his hands are free. Yeah.
We're done.
So so after this whole talk of kind of how to be successful in your first 5 years, I would like to end if each of us has kind of like maybe a one-liner on things to think about in success, and I guess I'll get started. But my thing would be figure out, and what I would tell the residents would be figure out exactly what you want, figure out what you're signing up for, and be honest about that with yourself. In terms of don't sign up for something that you can't deliver on, and you got to be number one. You got to be honest with yourself about what you can achieve and what you want to achieve, and that would be kind of one of the big things I would like to kind of leave everybody with. But putting you guys on the spot, if you have anything that you really want to profess as kind of a one-liner for a great talk that we just finished.
I
I
guess
guess.
I'd say again, just like to recognize we're in a great position. Someone brought up the football references, and I saw some in the chat, like the Harbaugh saying, "Who's got it better than us?" Like we're all cardiothoracic surgeons. We're taking care of patients. Yeah, there are a lot of struggles in the first 5 years and hard things, but to try and keep that positive outlook of it, we're doing a good work and it's a great job, and we're lucky to be doing it. So.
Yeah, just to dovetail off that, I mean, I think it's also important to realize it's a stressful job, and even the best heart surgeons, thoracic surgeons, they've had bad outcomes. And to sort of lean on your colleagues. I mean, I've got so many different chats, and we sort of sometimes just sort of debrief after tough days, and honestly, you don't win them all. but you're going to win a lot more than you lose. But it's really important you maintain perspective, especially in a climate where the job can be onerous and burdensome. You got to remember, like you said, you're taking care of patients. It's a really delicate, fragile trust between you and patient care or patients where you're taking care of them, and it doesn't always go as planned. It doesn't make you a bad surgeon or someone that shouldn't be operating. It just happens sometimes. Obviously, you want to avoid those situations, but it's important to maintain perspective. We're all human, right? No one's perfect.
If you always keep honest and good intentions with everything you do for your patients, you can't really second guess yourself. And that's always been something important that I've thought about. But thank you guys again. Thank you to the STS for allowing us to do this talk. Thank you to everybody who joined in and submitted questions and just listened to everything we have to say. I think this will be recorded and available to be rewatched for those of us that missed it. We hope to do another one again soon. Thanks, everybody, again.
And Derek, thank you, and
Thanks.
thank Tina. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.